Hi Jessica, this is Tony, and I'm doing your landscape critique here. This looks like Carondelet Park, I think. The first shot here, very nice. The exposure looks pretty good. Maybe could be just a little bit more, like a little on the under. You could underexpose it just a little bit, just to kind of give it a little bit more contrast or whatever, and a little bit more saturation. But um, that's being maybe just a little bit picky in terms of composition. I think just to kind of give it a little bit of interest, I might have, instead of having things kind of centered like this, maybe you might want to try a little something where maybe you crop a little bit off this edge over here and maybe a little bit off the water. And so it kind of puts the building maybe in the more left side of the picture, and give it a little bit more dynamic kind of, feel to it. Just a thought in terms of composition. The next one, it's one of those things where as you look at something like this, first off, the exposure maybe a little bit on the light side, a little overexposed. Could have been, and this with this particular assignment being the exposure compensation being an important part of this assignment, I'd definitely like for you to pay attention to those kinds of things. Whenever you have a shot like this, this would be sort of a shot where it would be, where it's just like you're shooting from eye level, and I see that there's this pipe here, but just something that might make it a little bit more interesting. Whenever you're out shooting, doing these kinds of things, you might want to get and maybe stand right here and use the pipe, in terms of when you're shooting the picture to kind of frame whatever it is, over here. So it would maybe make it a little bit more dramatic if you were, had gotten down a little bit lower, shot through underneath the pipe, looking out this way. You might have had kind of an interesting framing with the pipe and the water coming out of the spout there. Let's go down to the next one here. I do like the look of this one, but maybe you did the exposure compensation on this one because it looks a little on the underexposed side. But I do like the shallow depth of field, and that your background there is sharp and your foreground's kind of soft and subdued. But the fact that it's underexposed, I'm guessing that you may have done the exposure compensation on this. Now I do like how you have, instead of having the bandstand or the gazebo, whatever they call that, in the center over here, that you put it over on the side, adds to that more dramatic kind of composition, like versus the first one that you had in your series here. And also interesting that you can see those ducks on the water there too. So let's go down here. And this one looks like you used the exposure compensation, and overexposed. I'm guessing that that's what you did. So, but otherwise, in terms of the composition, really like this shot, in terms of sort of the architectural interest. But would really like to see, the +2 shot like this, where it's overexposed by +2, the one that's the normal exposure, and then also the one that would be the underexposed, kind of, like this. I'm guessing that this was the underexposed shot up here. But definitely all of the same shot from the same place. This one also looks overexposed by, the +2. In terms of composition, this is kind of nice where it leads into this little gazebo out there on the lake. I probably would have cropped off maybe this over the side over here, because what you're really wanting to look at is that little gazebo out there on the lake. This is a nice shot. Like this very much. Like how the gazebo over here frames your fountain over there. And this also looks pretty much overexposed. But in terms of like an HDR kind of shot, this would have been a great shot, in terms of being able to show an HDR where you'd have the sky and the clouds and everything. You'd have detail there, and then you'd also have detail in the shadows here in the gazebo. This one still looks pretty similar. Can't quite tell if there's a difference in exposure. They look very similar. Oh, okay. Oh, this one's the underexposed. Oh, okay. So maybe these two look very similar in exposure, and then this one definitely looks like the underexposed by 2 stops. So yeah, but I can, yeah, okay. So I see how that works there. Okay, okay, good. Yeah, so you did do the exposure compensation with the 3 shots. Okay, good. This next one, I guess maybe this is one more where it's the correct exposure, but I'm missing a little bit of, you know, where you were composing the gazebo over here, but that's okay. But you can see that, you know, how nice, you know, in terms of once you get the correct exposure, or maybe this is a little minus too, I don't know, but very nice dramatic kind of shot too. And once again, in terms of composition, just for your own, you know, in terms of doing composing kinds of things, I probably would have cropped off. I really like this little shimmer here of light going across the lake here, and I probably would have cropped off more of this edge over here, and maybe a little bit off the top up here of the sky, and really kind of focused in on in this area right in here. I think that's where the real interest is. When you center something like this, it doesn't give it quite as much dynamic as a dynamic look to the picture. Sometimes it's absolutely appropriate for things to be in the center. Now this one actually works pretty well, but you could actually, you know, in terms of like thinking about, you know, composition here, chop a little bit off here. You know, this might be something you might want to just look at and try. You could chop a little bit off the side here, and maybe just a little off the top right here, and that would put the gazebo just a little bit over to the top left here. But a very nice, you know, in terms of how the gazebo is positioned, you know, in the composition here. The exposure looks good too. Now this one, I think that if there was any way to darken the sky, because whenever you're looking at a picture, your eye goes to the brightest part of the picture, and sometimes when you have a little bit too much sky, your eye will just go right up to that first in the picture and miss what you're really trying to show. I think maybe you have a little bit, I probably would have walked up a little bit closer and gotten a little bit more of this flower bed, you know, with the sidewalks leading off in the center like that. And I probably would have cropped off a little bit of the sky, because my eye wants to go right to that spot. Right now, as I'm looking at it right here, I see this kind of area right here, which is not as strong, you know, in terms of when you're shooting a picture and trying to show, you know, so a bunch of interest in pictures. I think that you could have walked up a little bit closer, and the flowers might have been a little bit more interesting. But otherwise, in terms of like working with depth of field, it looks like, you know, you got a nice depth of field in most of these shots. And then the one where you have the shallower depth of field, this one right here with the ducks, I really like that, you know. So you have a good examples of pictures having lots of depth of field, and some with this more shallow depth of field. So, and then you also have your examples of the exposure compensation here too. So, good job. Thanks very much.